Welcome to EO Talks, Eastern Oregon's very own talk show, only here on EOAlive.
Marc Thielman. I'm a Alsea school superintendent, and I've been a kind of an immigrant Oregonian. I came to this beautiful state in 2006, brought my wife and kids, and have raised the kids here. It's a wonderful, wonderful state. Probably, in my opinion, I may be biased, but the best state in the union. Well, I was born and raised in Eastern Washington, Spokane, Washington to be exact, and I was the son of a boat trailer manufacturer, so kind of grew up in manufacturing and industry, working in the yard and as a young teenager, and then working kind of my way up into management. Went to college to be a teacher and an educator. Just kind of always had a servant's heart, and so rather than follow into the manufacturing world, I wanted to give back. So I went to Whitworth University, graduated with honors, and started my teaching career back in, it was in the 20th century. I guess it's getting to be a while back now. Started in 94, 95, and taught for 7 years, became an administrator, did well with that. I was a K-12 principal in St. John, Washington, and for 4 years, and got my superintendent's credential. And as a young 30-something, in Washington State, it was hard to be a superintendent in your early mid-30s. So I was recruited to come to Oregon in 2006 and have been here ever since. And my life began when I came here to Oregon. Well, I'm the Alsea superintendent. I started in Alsea in 2011, and that was following the 2010-2011 legislative session where in my previous district, I had to pass some legislation to help fund the school district because it was not financially very solvent. And that kind of began my connection with leadership and politics in Oregon. I have a proclivity for policy. So I continued to work in Alsea and then apply some of those policies that I had a role to play, myself and many others, of course, but also bipartisan stuff. So we did open enrollment, began to open up our public school to other families outside of our general school district area, which at the time was, it was kind of controversial and a little bit against the grain, but the thing is we were successful. So we went and bussed into other districts and brought kids, and that went on for a while until the opposition began to impose a lot of restrictions on open enrollment schools. And, so what we ended up doing in Alsea was just chartering the school district. So we're a K-12 charter school, and we're a charter district. So the school board is the charter board. And what that allowed us to do is kind of run more buses and amplify our footprint. And we've done all kinds of innovative things, including starting Learn at Home Oregon and doing online school. And we have students from all over the state. And the district has really prospered, and it's really benefited folks back in the Alsea community. The school is now the number one employer, and it's the number one source of family wage jobs in what was a depressed kind of timber ranching town that was struggling mightily for 30 years after the fall of timber. Well, the Alsea school community is, again, it's a small town. I think the largest it's ever been is about maybe 1,500 people, and currently, it's about 350 people. It's a small kind of village, if you will, in a beautiful valley between Waldport and Philomath. It's a high percentage of socioeconomically disadvantaged kids, in addition to bringing in kids from 9 other communities. So it's a very open community, a very giving community. And a very resilient community. It's a good fit for an innovative superintendent, and just the way that the community rallies in support of its kids and its school. It's just truly an awesome place to live and work. Yeah, well, as I've traveled around and met all kinds of people, there's a lot of common themes. Tongue in cheek, and not to be too divisive, but the number one thing I get is when I introduce myself and say that I'm running for governor, whether they're on Democrat or Republican or Libertarian or progressive, it really doesn't matter. The common theme I'm hearing is anybody's better than what we've got. So that's the most common thing I run into. But the other thing too is people really want to have a governor or a leader, aka the governor, who simply tells them the truth and is consistent. And consistency is a big common theme. And one anecdote is I was down in Gold Beach, and a retired gentleman, had gotten into prospecting because there's gold obviously in the Rogue River. And he was really upset because he wasn't allowed to sift through some of the river dredge that the county and the fisheries and the port people were dredging so that ships could come in and out of the river mouth. And he was really upset by that. And I said, well, if you were to buy a house and you needed to backfill, would you be allowed to go down and dig in the river and just dump it anywhere? And he said, no. And I said, well, that's why I'm running for governor, because we need to have a common standard where the leadership in the government models what it wants for people and vice versa. In other words, connecting people and contributing and getting behind them in their interests. So a good government listens and then does. It doesn't do the other way around, where it tells and then asks you to comply. It's a relationship that's two-way, and it's a relationship that can change as with time and issues, but it should be a responsive one. And always the electorate, people that the government serves, in order for that relationship to be healthy, the voters need to feel like they're being told the truth. And that's one of the things that I've been pushing as I've gone around the state. It seems to be resonating really well with people. We do the same thing in the school district. Obviously, if we didn't tell our parents the truth, then we continued to change the rubric and move the goalposts. That would erode the confidence that parents have in us, and therefore we can't do that. So we do a lot of just telling folks what we see. We do a lot of not telling people what we might think it means, and then through that discussion, we find common ground that leads to better service for kids and better educational outcomes and better community outcomes. So that's a little of the flavor, and that particular dialogue about relationship is the one I think that's resonating the most. Well, I mean, Oregon goes way back, as you know, and way back to the founding of Oregon City and the Hudson's Bay Company. And being a man of history, it is truly difficult to pick one, but I will. And this particular hero of mine would be Chief Joseph of the Nez Perce. And if anybody's ever studied the story of the Nez Perce Indians and their relationship with settlers and trappers, and even with the government, it's a heroic story, and it's a story in which Chief Joseph, right up to the very end, as he was trying to lead his people to freedom in Canada, if anybody ever read the documentary of his last speech, that gentleman was a leader, and he loved his people, and he didn't like war, but he had a strong sense of duty and service. And even up to the very end, he also had a mutual respect for the generals and the folks in the cavalry and General Howard, etc. And it really is something that I would encourage people to look into, because it's a great American story, and it's a modeling of leadership that I think is sorely needed once again in Oregon. Well, in terms of personal faith, absolutely. I grew up in the Catholic kind of church, and then later, as I got into adulthood, I've been to a variety of churches. But I think faith and a belief in God and a belief in something bigger than us is a grounding relationship that all people should at least explore. I think it's something that everyone has to settle, that question. So I would be, if I was to label myself, very much a practicing Christian, and believing in those principles of showing grace, having a curiosity about people, and a desire to serve them and help them, or help improve lives around me, and that intrinsic value that comes when you see good things happening for other people, and you got to be, albeit usually a small part, but a part nevertheless. And I think like to bring that model into the governor's office, and I would argue that is a relationship that needs to be brought back and really modeled in politics, because it can be mutual respect, caring, generating results, listening to people, and then people seeing you respond to that feedback, either through policy or in principle, I think is really, really important. So again, I guess you could say the man of the way. Oh, so any potential criticism they might level at me? Well, I tend to have a low level of fear, and for some reason I don't really, not easily intimidated. And when you're a leader like that, I look at a problem and want to solve the problem. And what I learned when I came to Oregon, it was kind of a rough road, is that the rules are very different here, and the relationship between superintendents and the kinds of protections and were around. So it took me a couple of years to kind of get my feet under me. So I went through the process where literally I did good work and had tremendous success, and then found myself uprooting people that, probably weren't advantaged by the good things that were happening under my leadership. I was superintendent Wallowa, and that was probably my most interesting trial, where the mettle of my character and leadership was probably mostly tested. And I ended up, with the ethics stuff and all that. And I never backed down. I stuck it out, went all the way through the process, through the attorney law judge. And not to my surprise, in the end, I was completely exonerated. And that's the kind of leadership we need in Oregon. You have to be able to stand in the storm and see the opportunity in the midst of all the crazy.
We got a little lightning round for you. First question there is ducks or beavers?
Oh, I have 9 children. That's painful. Alsea is in beaver country. My house residence is in Cottage Grove, which is duck country. So I'm going to take the political approach, and I would prefer to say I'm a platypus. So duck bill and a beaver body. But at the end of the day, when it comes to the big, when they play each other, they used to call it the Civil War, but I guess that's not okay anymore. But when they come to meet each other, I hate to say it, and I know this might offend some of my duck friends, but I'm a beaver.
Oof.
I know.
Alrighty. Well, do you have a favorite Oregon landmark?
There's too many to count. I think the one that's been the most impactful, and I find myself driving off the interstate every time I drive by, would be Multnomah Falls. It's one of the most beautiful waterfalls I've ever seen in my life. It's amazing. It's beautiful.
It absolutely is. Do you have a favorite Oregon beer?
Anything from 10 Barrels or Deschutes. Matter of fact, the best part of moving to Oregon, and I hope this is politically correct, there's two things besides all the great people in this beautiful state. One is the beer, and the other is the wine. The Pinot Noirs in Oregon are amazing. So I know that was probably more answer than you wanted, but now in terms of types of beer, I like Pilsners and Hefeweizens. Anything from 10 Barrel Deschutes is amazing. Even Black Butte Porter, wonderful.
Alrighty. Last up, do you have a favorite place in Eastern Oregon?
Eastern Oregon it's too beautiful to pick one. And I hate to say this, but because I had good times and bad times there. But if you've never been to the Wallowa Valley in Wallowa County, up by Wallowa Lake and up by Joseph, I would argue that is a place that is always calling me, and it's beautiful no matter what season of the year to visit. It's like the Alps of Oregon, just truly majestic place. Ironically, also where the Nez Perce tribe in their traditional grounds lived.
It is a pretty beautiful place.
So some of my final thoughts, this is a very historic time, and we're having a very significant gubernatorial election coming up. And we, after 30 some odd years of kind of one party rule, and the test of by fire that we've had with COVID, the homelessness crisis, and wildfires, and issues concerning kind of the just general policies, urban versus rural. It's time to really take a long look in the mirror. That's, I would encourage all Oregonians to do that, and to say, is it really getting better? And having lived here, and now that I'm 51 years old, I can say that I've been hearing about solutions to the homeless, and solutions for affordable housing, and solutions for rich versus poor, and Social Security, and port policy, and you can go on and on and on. It's the same stuff every election cycle, and I'm 51 years old, and it doesn't have to be that way. We absolutely can solve and make tremendous progress on things like affordable housing so that all of our children can work here in Oregon and afford a starter home. And as we know, being able to buy a home versus renting is one of your greatest life investments. And it's one of the things that creates stability for you as you get closer to retirement, as you have equity in the home, and that equity grows over time. So that's just one simple thing. I really want to encourage anybody interested in checking out my website. Please go to Marc for Oregon. It's MARC, not K, but C. And take a look at what I'm here to offer. The one guarantee I can give the voter, especially for those who are thinking that they may be willing to vote differently or take a chance on a school superintendent who's crazy enough to enter the gubernatorial race. The reality is I'm not crazy, and I will guarantee you results. You will see in a very short order, if I'm blessed enough and graced enough to become governor of Oregon, you will see results. I will give you that guarantee. And I really appreciate your support. And it's a great opportunity to come here and be interviewed. So thank you.